and welcome to Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives like you can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. Have you ever wondered about the perfect timing for your creative dreams? Or have you felt the pressure to achieve greatness early only to find that your path is taking a bit longer than expected? In our fast-paced world, it often feels like success needs to happen right now or it won't happen at all. But what if the journey itself is what shapes your creative potential? What if the experiences we gather over time are essential to the stories we eventually tell? In today's episode, I want to explore the concept of timing and the unique journeys that bring us to our creative peaks. Many of us start with grand dreams, imagining our work being celebrated far and wide at a young age. Yet, for some, the path to creative fulfillment is winding and filled with delays. Does this mean we've missed our chance, or does it mean that our best work is yet to come, waiting for the right moment to be fully realized? Think about your own creative journey. Have there been times when you felt like giving up because things weren't happening quickly enough? How did those moments of waiting, learning, and growing contribute to who you are today? Sometimes the setbacks and the slower pace are not signs of failure, but rather the necessary process that prepares us for the ultimate expression of our creativity. Today's guests are a perfect example of this. Anna Schmidt and Donald Osborne are siblings with a 23-year age gap, brought closer through the collaborative process of writing and publishing a book together. Donald, a professional pilot, and Anna, a homeschool mom, found a deep connection through their creative endeavor despite being raised in entirely different households and leading seemingly divergent lives. Their story is one of patience, persistence, and the beautiful unfolding of creativity over time, and it proves that creative success does not have an expiration date. So join me as we dive into their story, exploring how timing, persistence, and the power of family relationships can shape our creative journeys. Anna and Donald, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us. We are so excited.
I appreciate it too. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm so glad y'all are here. Your story, I read it and I thought, okay, first of all, I've never had two guests on at one time. So this is really exciting. It's like, let's try something new. Why not? But your story was just so fun. I thought, I work very closely with my sister. She's my editor, but we're 21 months apart. And so we may as well be twins in a lot of our ways of thinking and behavior. So tell us your story. How did you go from being raised in different households and having that age gap to working together and blending your creativities?
Well, I was just thinking you should tell the story about the first time you brought Beth home.
I was gonna tell that story
just to kind of highlight our age difference.
Annie was born about the same day I graduated from college, so that 23 years is perfect there, and so I was in and out a lot the first couple of years she was around. Then I would be gone for quite a while. And of course, she was my little pet human when I got home. So, she'd run and I'd pick her up. We'd play games and go out to the park. And Shadron, where I grew up, was a small little town. Everybody knows everybody. And they would see us together. And so just everybody assumed that she was my kid. And so it was kind of funny that way. And then I never had a really serious girlfriend. And the first one I ever brought home was what became my wife later, who became my wife later. And I was introducing everybody, and here comes Annie running up, and she jumps up, and I pick her up, and she looks at me, Beth looks at me and says, "Is that your kid?" And it took a while to convince her that Annie wasn't my kid, and a lot of people in town thought Annie was my kid. Just when I was in town, we were together, we'd be at the park, or she'd run a ride with me wherever I was going. That's how it all started. And
it is true.
About raising in entirely different environments. I was raised in a almost poverty type situation, and I was kind of on my own a lot because I was the oldest. Where I'll let Annie tell, she was raised in a more conventional, better atmosphere. I think, not that my mom didn't try every humanly thing she could to give me everything I needed.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I came along, and because my siblings were so much older than me, I sort of had the only child upbringing. And I had, just because of our circumstances, a more stable environment. And so I think that really kind of shaped and changed how our personalities were, and all of those things. But I think it's been really fascinating like as Donald and I have reconnected, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, like we're actually very similar. We have a very similar personality, like humor wise. We laugh at the same things. But there's this quote that I always go back to, and they say that when the oldest child in a family is most likely to be a CEO or a president, and the youngest child is most likely to end up as a comedian. But like in our family, that was definitely role reversal. Like I am probably just the more like organized and just that kind of mind, whereas Donald, he's the one who like cracks all the jokes and draws people into him with his personality.
What she said is funny, because if you were to meet Annie, spend time with her, spend time with me, you would be very surprised that Annie laughs at anything I say.
Well, so
or right.
well, sure, absolutely. So y'all grew up separately, but you clearly were close at some point, and maybe life happens, because that is a big, you're starting life with your girlfriend's soon to be wife kind of thing, and you're just growing up, and then so you drift apart. So what brought you back together?
I love that you asked that. So like, you know how many times in life the really hard things are the things that teach you lessons and bring you closer. And so like Donald and I guess it was about 4 years ago, like our lives just kind of started to fall apart. Our mom was getting sicker and sicker. She was really in this place of no longer being able to take care of herself. Donald and I were far away from home, so we had that in common. So in the meantime, as our mom was getting less and less able to take care of herself, our sister died. She was diagnosed with cancer. 3 weeks later, she was gone. It was, earth shattering. We had to come together for that. And then, 7 or 8 months later, our mom did die. And then 3 weeks after that, our nephew was killed in our car accident. So we had this like horrible, insane trauma that, a lot of bad things came out of that, but a lot of really beautiful blessings came out of that. Donald and I were talking more and more. I think we've become really close in a way that we probably wouldn't have without those really sad tragedies in our lives. And, it's helped us to be connected and creative and all of the things that this podcast is about.
I've always felt I lived and worked in a very analytical world, but I always thought that I had this right brain stuff going on all the time, from whether writing music, playing music. I've got 10 books bounced around in my head all the time, as long as probably 45 songs in my head all the time. But I knew I wanted to write this book, and that's when I called Annie and told her, I want to write this book, but my weak point is I'm pretty good at a lot of things, but if things I'm very weak at are spelling, capital letters, and punctuation. So I knew I would need a lot of help in writing this. And I have to thank Annie is mainly the reason this book is published and doing well now, because she took a bunch of, I think she even wrote this in somewhere. She took a bunch of stories that I've been repeating throughout my life, throughout the world, and put it into a very enjoyable, easy to read story.
I love that. How did you, Anna, how did you feel when he came to you and said, hey, I have this idea? Did you look at him like, okay, that's great?
Well, my first thought was like, well, Donald, you have a lot of ideas. And like, some of them come to fruition, but sometimes, he likes to talk. So some of them are like a little harebrained. And I assumed that this was one of those harebrained ideas. And then he sent me, I guess it was like 3 or 4 chapters of ideas that he had written down. And as I was reading through there, I was really touched by how much I didn't know about my brother, and how much earnestness he had, and the stories behind his stories were just this beautiful thing that I wanted to explore more. And, I just started writing, and I would have more questions, and he would provide more stories. And it almost became like, what do we leave out? Because there was just so much that we could include. So it was kind of a lovely problem to have.
And exactly, leaving out was the hard part. I've had many friends call and say, or write, text, say, why didn't you put this story in? Don't you remember when we did this? And were you ashamed of that? And I tell them the hard trick was to decide what to leave out. So
that's right. There's a part 2 for that. That's why you have a sequel, a follow-up, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So Anna, were you always a writer when he came to you, were you like,
Yeah, so interestingly, like that was my dream as a small child. When you talk about, you expect certain things to happen at a certain time. I mean, I told anybody who would listen that I definitely have a book on the shelves by the time I was like out of high school or out of college. And, life happens, years go by. I married my high school sweetheart. We moved to North Carolina and we had children, and I became a homeschool mom. And there's not as much of a time to focus on your own writing when you're also trying to educate young children and keep them alive. So, my children are older now. My oldest is a rising junior in high school. And then I do have a 6-year-old son and a daughter in between that. But I really felt like this was a time to re-explore some of that writing. And I really thank Donald so much, because I felt like that part of me had been just hidden, maybe sleeping for a good many years. And it's been this wonderful reconnection to myself, even rediscovering those writing talents that I have.
I love that. And Don, have you always been a storyteller? Like you've just always been able to tell a good story?
I think so. I was always that guy that had a story to tell, whether it was, in class when I wasn't supposed to be talking, or sitting around all my friends in the bar, even in the cockpit of the airplane. I mean, I've had several friends call up and say, I remember when you told me that story when we were flying over the ocean one day. And so that's been a lot of fun. On your intro, you talked about perfect timing. And that's another thing I've told a lot of people is this book took me 67 years to write. Right. There's no way I could have written this book at 20 years, 30, 40, even 50, because I didn't know enough about life yet, and until you suffer lots of joy, lots of tragedy, and just the hard knocks. It's an old saying about it's not how hard you get hit to the ground, it's how quick you get back up. And it takes that much life, I think, to write something like this.
Oh, for sure. And
then
it's so funny. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, my thought was, I could make this thing funny, and Annie could make it flow and be easy to read and make sense to everybody. Because she once in a while would, now, is this a misprint or is this an aviation thing? Or she'd say, I don't think we better write that.
It's nice to have a little filter there. And it's so funny because I will say it over and over again. Like, I've always loved writing. I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know it was something I could do. And I'm glad that I didn't try it sooner, because where I am now is not even the stories I tell now are not the stories that I would write 10, 15 years ago. And I just don't think they would have the same impact on me or the readers of the story, because I do have so much more to offer at this point in my life, even though I write fiction, right? Like it's a totally different story now than it would have been, because you can relate a little differently to the characters when you're writing them. So was there ever a point at which y'all were, and siblings do this anyway, but did you butt heads over the creative process?
I would say very, very, very little. I wouldn't say butt heads. We had some discussions without injury, possibly, but but no, for the most part, we kind of somehow had this common goal.
I think it worked out really well because Donald had a lot of respect for my skill set as being the writer, and understanding the grammar, and like just being able to write in a chronological order, for example. And I have a lot of respect for Donald's aviation skills and his years of experience and his stories. And so I think that mutual respect was really helpful. And then I think we were also able and willing to accept criticism for each other. Like if he read something of mine that didn't work, I was able to not take it personally. If I told him, that story might not go over as well as you think it will, like he was super kind and accepting that. So I think having mutual respect as writing partners, I don't know that there's a magic formula, but we somehow hit on it.
I think it's in your brain somewhere. Like you talked about fiction. I swear that there are 100 fictional characters in my brain doing all different kind of things. And for me, it's a matter, I got to organize this enough to actually write it down, because, was this a dream or did I really see it happening? I got to look into this character here.
That is the process.
And of course, all fiction I know is based probably people I've met in my life. I wonder if this is what he's really thinking. I wonder if, he says he did this, but I think he did that,
Oh yeah, that's the process I go by too. They pop up in my head and they're like, "Hey, we have a story. You should start writing." And it's like, "Will you just slow down a minute?" Like that's how that happens. So I love that. Okay, so tell me what your book. Okay, it's stories, but are there stories about your family, about your job? Like, what is your book about?
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Dom.
Yeah. Yes. Just what you said. It starts out as I'm a young boy in Shadburn, Nebraska, which is right on the Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska border, without a lot of means, but I did have an idea in my head what I wanted to do. And it basically goes from that point to where we are sitting right now today. The last few sentences in the book are really, a few weeks ago. So.
Yeah. Anna?
Yeah, it's definitely in the memoir category, but it also dives into the aviation world. So it talks about safety protocols. It talks about things with the FAA that probably need change. So we call for a little bit of advocacy in our book about things that could benefit pilots and passengers alike. It also has the sense of travel adventure. We follow Donald into Honduras. We follow him into Haiti after a major earthquake. He travels all over the world, all to the many states. He has interactions with U.S. presidents and A-list celebrities. We even have a chapter in which he is flying human organs as cargo to organ donors. And so that's kind of like a little transcendent moment in there where he's just looking out on the tarmac and is like watching this person who was once whole and like how their body is going out into all these new people who will have their lives saved. So I feel like it's not just a memoir. It's also this adventure, this exploration into airports and travel and what might actually be going through the mind of the pilot who is flying your plane.
I agree with that. One thing that I really thought worked well is I wanted this to be enjoyable for other pilots, but I also wanted a non-pilot, non-aviation person to be able to read the whole book, not get lost, not wonder what is he talking about or what does that mean. And that's where the corroboration really went well, because she would call, "Is this an airplane thing or did you type it wrong?"
That's so.
And I do think I'm amazed. It's like they say when you win the lottery, all these friends and relatives you didn't know you had pop up out of nowhere. I've had many conversations with people I haven't talked to for years, and that's really been a big enjoyable part of this. Is they'll call up and say, "Hey, I've just read your book," or "I hear you wrote a book." And one person that's known me most of my life even said, "I didn't even know you had a sister." So
Thanks a lot.
Sorry. I guess the stories could have elaborated a little bit more, but I guess maybe I talked about myself a little too much. There's always something to learn.
I know.
So funny. So was there anything, so that just made me think, was there anything super surprising that you learned about each other on this journey?
I can answer that. I did not realize that Annie had a very, very well developed sense of humor that would understand mine. I always figured she, would be just a little bit above me on most of this stuff.
Yes. I mean, so the book is also, as you can see, Donald is hilarious, and like that comes out throughout the book. And so we really wanted the book to be hilarious. We wanted people to laugh, but there's also a lot of heartfelt, touching moments. The book really explores like Donald's childhood and like later on, just some issues like his dad. We have different dads, and his dad, due to different circumstances, like wasn't there for him when he was growing up. And so it really touches on like, his longing for a dad, and yet like he has this ability to teach his own son to fly. And so there's a whole chapter in there about teaching the next generation pilot. And, we get to be in the cockpit as his son flies his first solo airplane for the first time, and just thinking of what a legacy, like Donald maybe feels like he did not receive a legacy from his dad, but he now has a legacy that he can pass on to his children and grandchildren. And so we really explore that. And, I haven't lived life long enough to tell all of these stories. So I definitely relied on Donald a lot. And that was a really interesting and lovely exploration for me.
That's fantastic.
We're talking about my son. My son never had much of an interest in aviation, and literally one day he decided, all of a sudden, hey, I think I want to learn to fly an airplane. And just what she said, it's like, God, I can just imagine if he really gets into this, becomes an instructor, and teaches his future child to fly. I mean, that's a generational thing, and whether or not that happens or not, at the very least, he's not going to ever get in an airplane without thinking about me a little bit. So that was a real fun part of it.
Everything, your career, writing a book, like it's just bringing family together, and that's one of my favoriteest things in the whole world.
And I think something really beautiful too is, because Donald and I had been raised in different generations, but by the same mom, like we had different viewpoints of her. So it was really interesting for me to kind of explore our mom through Donald's perspective. And I think him being able to see our mom through my perspective was really healing. I mean, our mom was this very typical, like Nebraska, hardworking woman who would, wake up with the sun and go to bed at night, like having fully exhausted all of her energies. And Donald often felt like she didn't have as much time for him. And a lot of it was she was raising 4 children on her own. She was doing everything she could to put food on the table. And then we talked earlier about how my upbringing, was more privileged than that. Like my mom was at home. She did have a little bit more time. And so I think, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, Don, but like this has been really healing for you to see this full circle of our mom and be able to, memorialize her and, give tribute to her in a really
definitely
otherworldly way, I guess.
It's back to that timing thing. It allowed me to look back when I was 10, 12, 13, 14. All I could think about was me, like any kid that age. Even as I got older, it was, why don't I get more time? Why doesn't she care what I want to do? And it isn't until you get to this stage in life you can look back and actually maybe even walk in her shoes a little bit and think, well, of course, she was doing everything she possibly could and then some. And here I am worried about, well, I want you to be interested in this. I remember one time she was scrubbing the floor on her hands and knees, and I want to sit down next to her and talk. And of course, get off the floor. I just cleaned it. I'm busy. I got to finish this. And I carried that with me for quite a while. But through the process, I can look back and think, well, yeah, she had this stuff in her mind that needed to get done. And what I needed wasn't as important as what she needed to get done in my mind. But in her mind, it was, I'll talk to him another time maybe, or what he has to say isn't as important as this floor. But once it all comes together in your mind, it's a very healing, relaxed, like God, I know everything now. I understand it.
Oh,
Yeah, and it was cheaper than therapy.
Exactly.
I feel like, I don't know if I told you this, Donald, but like I cried when I wrote the last chapter because I think it just, we just really we tried to bring everything into focus with all that our mom had been through. And like, she passed away before the book was written. And so it was healing and tear jerking to really put that final chapter on the page.
You read a lot of the comments other people have written, and I didn't see as much emotional. A lot of comments would if I could say it in a few words, said I laughed and cried when they read the book. So.
Mm. Yeah, if your work can have impact on somebody like that, to take them through all of the emotions, then you've written the right book. Like, you've done it the right way. That should always be the goal, is to elicit emotion of some sort and make people feel when they read your story. So I'm really excited to get my hands on your book, because I'm just like, I kind of feel like I know you, but now I really want to get to know you. And I think through your book would be one way to do that. So thinking about, the whole, everything takes time, and reaching your dreams. And, Anna, you always wanted to be an author, and now you finally are a published author. So just between the two of you, what advice would you give to other creatives who think this is taking way longer than I expected?
I remember when she said that we had a couple people read it, and then they had a lot of advice, and she said, well, we're gonna have to do a couple rewrites. And I thought, oh my gosh, that seems like a lot of work, and I already said everything I have to say. And then she would rewrite some stuff, and I would think, oh yeah, that's so. To answer your question, patience. It's a definite exercise in patience, and it's a huge exercise in, well, other people might have something to say. There's somebody else living on this planet except me. And look.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing, and just also taking your time to get the right things on the paper. I mean, sometimes you just get so excited. I have this draft. I want to share it with everybody. But if you put it out there too soon, you're too close to it, for one thing, and you haven't had that chance to take a step back and take another critical look at what you've actually put on paper. And even still reading through it now, there's things I would change. You see the little mistakes. There's like, oh, I wish I would have said this. I don't know, I think so. Donald, you told me it's like trimming a tree, because Donald used to have a tree trimming business. It's like, you take off this little branch, but then you have to take off this little branch. You have to know when to stop trimming the tree. Exactly. And I think that was the push and pull of actually getting this book into publication form, was doing enough but not cutting down the whole tree.
What you're saying there, it's the thing probably amazes me as much anything is everybody else's opinion on this when it was done. And I'm really glad that I waited to hear their opinion after it was done, because and it's almost like it's really an honor to think somebody was a bit offended they weren't in the book, because that means, well, I was a bigger part of their life maybe than I thought I was, and they thought they should be. That one friend, I remember, he called and said, we need more about me in here. and so he said, don't you remember we did this? And so I talked to Annie, he said, we have to put more about this guy in here, because he's right. I'm missing some really good stuff about him. And
funny. that is a hard thing to do, though, is like, especially, I don't know how it would work with a memoir, because I've not written one, but with my books, I know that having too many voices, especially too early on in my head when I'm trying to write the story, is very dangerous, because it does then take away my story and it becomes somebody else's story. But it is also very important for my work to have other eyes on it, because I'm so close to it that I might miss something completely. There's a big old hole over here and I thought I filled it in. And so to have other voices in, you have to find that balance of when is it good to listen and when is it good to be like, well, thanks for your opinion, and move on.
I guess, but as far as waiting for the perfect time to write a book or to come into that creativity, I mean, I don't think you should, if you feel like you have a story, you should never stop writing. You might not have stumbled upon the right time to get the story that you need to write, but you shouldn't wait to write until that time comes.
I agree, because I think we're all given a story for a reason at the time that we're given the story. You may have had this story bouncing around in your head for so many years, decades even, but the reason that you were motivated to write it when you did was because there's somebody who needs to hear that story when it was ready to be told. There's a lot to be said for that.
Well, Annie and I are going to go back to our hometown over in July, and it's like the local small town festival. I was telling her on the phone the other day, I said, in a way, that's going to be a weird feeling, maybe almost embarrassing, because now everybody in that town knows everything about me, and I don't know anything about them anymore because I've been away so long. So,
definitely see how that might be a little intimidating.
But I think it'll be really good. Like, I haven't been back to our hometown in 3 years, but so Donald and I did grow up in the same town. So we knew a lot of the same people, but from different aspects, I guess. So it'll be really interesting to go and do that.
That's exciting. Okay, so
it is.
I could keep asking you all of these questions, and I could just really dig into this, but I also know that your time is valuable. And so I want to flip the script at this point and let you take run of the show. You guide the conversation, you ask your questions, whatever you want to do. The show is now yours.
Well, I'd love to ask you a little bit about your book, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
So as a fellow self-published author, have you considered audiobooks? Because that's something that people keep asking Donald and I if we have considered audiobooks.
Okay, it is so funny that you asked that question. And when this airs, this day will have passed, but I literally kicked off a Kickstarter campaign this morning.
No way.
To fund audiobooks for my current series. Now, I would love to turn my first series into audiobooks, but there's only 2 of them, and right now my focus is this bigger series that I'm working on. And so, yes, and it's funny because my husband, he has a mild form of dyslexia, and we never really knew the benefit of audiobooks until probably about 4 years ago. They also weren't quite as popular. Like, they were, but they were expensive. It wasn't like you could just go find the ones you wanted, and now you've got Audible, which is becoming very popular. And so he has consumed so many books just in the last 4 years, like 3 or 4 times as many as his entire lifetime, right? Because of audiobooks. And I thought I would love, because I know that people need audiobooks to provide my stories in that format. So yes, I have considered it, but it is expensive to have professionally produced.
There's technology out there too that will kind of do it for you. But one of my questions would you use your own voice and read it yourself, or would you hire that done with somebody with more acting experience? Or
Yeah, and see, that's a great question, because some people are like, just do it yourself. And I'm like, that's fine and good. But once you invest in the technology to do it, and the space to do it in, and that kind of thing, like, I think I would be more comfortable just I don't want to have to learn new technology to edit it. That's my biggest thing, having to edit. The podcast is as far as my editing skills go. And so I think I would pay somebody else to do it. And there is AI out there, but there's something about that human voice that you can tell a difference.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I've considered it, but I just don't think I want to try.
Some of this, I've been fortunate enough to be in recording studios a lot, and some of this new technology allows you to basically read through. If you make a mistake, you just keep going, and then they come in what we used to call splicing together, but it's done all electronically now, where if you mess up a word, they'll splice in with your voice. It can go through and find that word that you said properly. And so it's not really AI, it's just very advanced technology that allows you to record it pretty quickly.
Yeah,
so it's interesting.
All about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're looking at $2,500 to $3,000.
Yeah.
$2,500 to $3,000 a book.
Right.
So
And then how do you recoup that? I mean, it's right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why, I did go the Kickstarter. I've never done a Kickstarter before. I've never tried it. But, there are so many projects out there worthwhile. And I'm like, listen, let me help you and provide an audiobook. And in return, I'll give you the audiobook. Let's get out there and work together. So, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Oh, that's so great.
at my age, a lot of people told me, I'm glad that you didn't go with the real small print because it made it easier for me to read. And so I could see an audiobook really helping people, older people, not me, but.
Oh, yeah. Older people with vision impairments, people
Exactly
with,
right.
learning disabilities, that kind of thing. That's just been that literally the last year that I've really felt the desire and the motivation to do it. And today was the day. Just let's start and see what happens.
We have right now we have two more. We're basically in the middle of two separate projects going back and forth, which I've really found interesting because there's just some days I don't want to think about reality. I want to think about science fiction, and other times, and it's going back and forth. And I really have enjoyed that. There's always something. I guess it's like living on a farm. You can't ever just sit back and think, I'm going to relax, because there's always something to do. And
I can vouch for that. I can attest to that exactly.
Do you tend to focus on one project at a time, Jennifer, or do you bounce back and forth between things?
It depends on how obsessive I become with something. Usually if I'm in a book, like really in the story, and it's really got my attention, I can't think about anything else. But this last go around, I wrote 3 books back to back to back. And then the fourth one I started, and I was like, I'm just not in it. I'm going to start something else. And so I started working on something else completely. So it just kind of depends on where my brain is and if the story gets a hold of me. And I really need the 4th book to come together because it's the last book of the series. And like, it's kind of important.
Right. So are you the type of person who reads one book at a time, or are you able to read several?
I read several at a time. I would say that I probably have 3 to 4 going at any one time, and one will be audio, one will be Kindle, one will be paperback. And
Exactly.
Yeah.
I guess that's an equivalent of flipping through the channels. I can't. I get bored with one, so I'm going to flick and see what's on the news.
That's exactly what it is. Some people, like my husband, is like, no, one track mind. I can only take in one at a time. But he'll take in that book and he can tell me almost word for word, a summary of the book. And I'm like, I can tell you how I felt when I finished it, because I am such a mood and vibe reader that I'm just like, well, I know that made me feel warm and fuzzy inside, but give me a couple weeks and I'll tell you what it's about.
Definitely.
One thing is, a correlation I could draw between aviation and writing is when you're in that airplane flying, your mind is pretty full. There's a lot of things to think about, and the more experience you acquire, the easier it is for your mind to be full like that and handle it. Well, I found that with writing too. Is my mind, I like to get up first thing in the morning. I usually wake up before the sun. So as the sun's rising, it's a very great feeling to have my mind completely full of what I'm writing at that moment. And that usually lasts for about an hour. Then I move on to whatever else I want to do that day. But I seem to have an hour of creativity every morning.
That's awesome. What about you? Because you've got kids, and therefore...
Yeah, so... I wish I could do that. I do get up early. I usually work out and I do my Bible study, and then it's time to start homeschooling. So my time usually will come during quiet times in the afternoon, sometimes if people are out of the house in the evenings. But I do try to sit down for at least 20 to 30 minutes a day and see how much work I can do. And then weekends, I usually have more time. So there's it's squeezing out here and there because I don't have time to, write a full chapter in a sitting for sure. So you take the creativity where you can get it.
Yes, that's very familiar. Now
that's interesting between the two of us, is because I'm semi-retired right now, and it was interesting to hear, well, I got to do this, and I think to myself, I'm almost guilty of this blessed life I have. I kind of do what I want to when I want to anymore. I think you work your whole life to get to that point, and I almost felt sorry. Well, I got to do this today, and I think I can remember that stage of my life. I don't know that I ever want to go back to that.
There are the ups and the downs in every life, right? In every timeline, you've got the good and the bad, and they are, again, that's what makes you who you are. That's what makes your work exactly what it's supposed to be today. So yeah, I loved my kid when she was 3, but you better bet I wouldn't go back like her.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I would love to go back and find my 24-year-old body, but I would never want to give up my 67-year-old brain.
Okay. Yes.
Somehow
And
the
that
fuse
energy.
two would be perfect.
So I forget a lot of words now that I did not forget in my 20s.
Oh my goodness. Yes. The other day I was
Yesterday
Oh, go ahead.
Yesterday on the beach, a kid tossed me a football and went out for a pass, and I was able to toss it and do a really nice pass, and he caught it. I thought to myself, I still got it. You take these little enjoyable things, and that's
There we go.
That's so funny. Yeah.
Just one dislocated shoulder later.
oh yeah,
It's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, a little pulled muscle here. It's never hurt anybody for long. Gosh. Yeah, no, words are hard. And that's really important when you're a writer to have the words. And sometimes you just sit there and stare at a blank page and you're going, and today will be the day I finish this sentence, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, that is so true. Are there things that you do when you're in that creative lull where you don't have a sentence coming?
I walk away. Like I will become so obsessed with trying to find the words that the words are just like, ha ha, like it's not going to happen. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll get up and walk away. I'll go sit down with the book, and that will be my creative time, is imagination world, because I can't. I'm not one of those that can just put any words on the page. I've gotten better. I used to self-edit like crazy. I've gotten better about that.
Yeah.
I have to have the words that I want on the page.
Yeah, I recently I opened up a separate document and just called it free writes, and just allowed myself, because I'm like you, like I can't just put words on, and I'm constantly self-editing as I go along. So I just would write random things that came into my head in that other file, when no one will see, right? So that I'm able to go back and save the good words for the actual paper that I'm writing, or the book that I'm writing.
You two need to wait, and this is a foreshadow for you. In about 30 years, you're going to walk into a room and forget why you walked into that room. And so far, it doesn't bother me, but if that ever happens in the bathroom, I'm going to start worrying about myself.
I think we've all had those moments that make you go, "Ooh, I'm glad that was just a fluke," because it will happen again.
Oh man, that is so true.
Sure. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I want to ask y'all, how can listeners connect with you? What website, socials, where are your books available, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we're available at Amazon.com. Just search Where We Land, A Pilot's Reflections at Altitude. And then you can also connect with us on social media at where_we_land_book on Instagram and TikTok. Okay, I had no idea saying that out loud would be that cumbersome until I tried it out, but it looks good on the screen.
I was in Palm Springs, California the other day, and they have a great big, huge, can I say Barnes and Noble? We have to edit that out.
No, you're good.
So I walked into this big Barnes and Noble and asked for the book, and this kid went behind the desk. So, yeah, right here. Would you like us to order it for you? That was really a great feeling to walk out of there thinking, anybody in this store, anybody in this state can go here and find the book.
Yeah. So any Barnes and Noble, you can order our book. They're probably not going to have it on the shelves, but you can order our books from Barnes and Noble as well.
Oh, that's
and we're working to get into some independent bookstores.
Oh, good. And hopefully local libraries, maybe?
Yes. We are currently, you can check out our book from the Shattern Public Library in Shattern, Nebraska. So if you're ever in the neighborhood.
Fantastic. And I guarantee, you go buy their book, they'll sign it for you if you get it to them. I mean, why not?
Absolutely.
I love that. And I will make sure that all of that is in the show notes. So all they have to do is go click on a link. They won't have to spell out all the underscores like that. It'll
perfect. Thank you.
You can find you. Okay. I have one final big question for you, and you can each answer it if you'd like, instead of giving one answer. But the big question is, what is one piece of advice or encouragement you want listeners to walk away with if they hear nothing else?
Go ahead.
I was hoping you would go first.
All right. I know mine already. If I was to give advice to someone wanting to write a book, and I have done this already because people say, everybody I know either wants to start their own business or write a book. but that's about as far as it goes. And just the other day, a guy said, well, what do I have to do? I said, one of the biggest things I learned about actually writing a book to this level and getting it this far is you got to find somebody that knows what they're doing. You got to find an editor and a publisher and somebody that is passionate about it and doing this, because you can't do it by yourself. If it wasn't for Annie, my book would still be a bunch of handwritten stuff and some stuff in my phone and just a pile of stuff. It'd still be good stuff, but it wouldn't be available to the whole public that way. So the big advice is you can't do it by yourself. You got to find somebody you trust to help you.
That's great advice.
Yeah, and I guess I would say, even if you're not currently writing, immerse yourself in words. So even those years that I was not writing more than a Christmas letter and a Facebook status, I was reading constantly. So I will devour like a couple books a week. And I think that has prepared me to then actually sit down and write. And I wish with all my heart that I had not stopped writing completely. I wish I would have been journaling and writing short stories, even if they weren't even going to be finished because I didn't have time. So just to keep writing, to keep practicing, immerse yourself in words, read books about writing. I found that to be super helpful. Just, learning from experts and being a lifelong learner, I think are really important things that you need to be a writer.
One thing you just reminded me of, I'm going to add to my advice is now's the time to do it. Everybody wants to, this is something I'm going to do. And if today was the last minute I have left and I got a minute to reflect, the thing that would hurt me more than anything is what I wanted to do that I didn't try. All the things I failed at, all the things I was successful at would be way, way behind. I wish I would have tried that. Even if it's a small thing, I just wish, giving up I think that's what you would take away is, I'm sure glad I tried this.
Yes. I don't think most people regret trying something they've always wanted to do. I mean, unless it's skydiving and the parachute doesn't work. But other than that, I mean, there's very few things that, you look back on life and go, man, I hate that I tried that, because it defines exactly what you may or may not be good at. It defines, what your next progress might look like, So yeah, I think all of that is fantastic advice. Y'all, thank you so much for being here today and having this conversation. This was fun. I really loved getting to know y'all.
This was a lot of fun. I definitely appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having this podcast where creative people can connect.
And that's my goal. That was my goal from the beginning, is to make sure that we could connect with each other because like you said, you can't do it by yourself. No way. Even if it's somebody just in your corner saying, hey, you can do this, do the next thing, you've got to have somebody there with you. So thanks again. And I hope y'all have a fantastic rest of your days.